Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you um, via this via this recording, whether you're watching or listening, or however it is you're coming in contact with what we're doing here today. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to offer some thoughts today, and hopefully they're of some curiosity to you. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about the three marks of existence. Um, in Buddhism, the three marks of existence is an ancient, very ancient idea, a very ancient teaching going all the way back to the time of the Buddha himself, according to the scriptural record, the Pali record, the Pali canon, we call it. The three marks of existence are kind of a fundamental idea. Um, and I'm going to talk about them in the traditional way, meaning I'm going to talk about the original and traditional, the most commonly listed three things. There's a second version of the three marks of existence that shares two of the three, but disagrees on the third one, which I'll talk about very briefly when we get to it. But for now, no worries. Today we're talking about the three marks of existence. Um, and I'm going to talk about them in an unusual way. I'm going to talk about them as calls. And I'm going to talk about how they bounce off of our lives, how we receive them, how we relate to them, what we do with them, as being an echo of that call, or maybe even a response. Right? I like the idea of relationship. So that's what you're hearing me do is I'm setting up a relationship. I like the idea of dharma, of gospel, of teaching, being a call that goes forth, and then we hear in our hearts or we feel in our bodies, we see in our mind some part of us that rises up, some part of us that awakens, some part of us that is arrested a little bit by what we're hearing, right? And a feeling emerges, a thought emerges, curiosity arises, something. We can feel that there's something there for us, and so we move toward it in some way, right? We kind of lean toward it, toward that piece of dharma, because there's a relationship now, right? And I notice this in our physicality too when we're listening to someone and they're talking from a place that's really alive, and something awakens in us that feels really alive. We tend, often unconsciously, to lean a little bit toward them with our bodies. We tend to lean a little bit toward them to be just a little closer, right? There's part of us that wants to incline toward that which is enlivening, toward that which we feel nourished by or curious about, that we want a closer relationship with, right? So that's kind of the way I want to talk about these, as opposed to the idea that, oh, these are three things that the Buddha said are marks of existence, and so I should listen to them and I should memorize them and I should accept them. Yeah, that's fine too. I don't have a judgment of that. But that doesn't feel very relational. That just feels like memorizing something. I'd much rather I'd much rather feel it bounce off of me or seep into me or wrestle with it a little bit, have a conversation with it. That feels a little more alive to me, right? Otherwise, our relationship with Dharma, our relationship with, in this case, the three marks of existence, is just an arranged marriage. We don't even know each other, but we're supposed to commit to each other forever. I'd rather dance with it a little bit first. So that's what we're doing today, three marks of existence. Um, and I also like the idea of an echo, as I said, call and response or call and echo. The reason I'm using that word echo is because I like the idea that an echo is just the original thing that was said. It's just the original sound, but it bounces off of earth. It bounces off of matter. It bounces off of something. And then it comes back to us. right? We're all kind of, it seems hardwired almost when we're in a really big landscape, you know, where there's the like the Grand Canyon type of landscape where there's the big cliff or the big, you know, chasm or the big gorge to yell, ah, and then see if we can hear it, you know, come bouncing back to us off of the cliff, off of the mountain, off of the whatever it is it hits. There's something about us that likes to kind of hear that come back to us. And we know it's the same thing we just got through saying, I yell my name or I yell hello or we say, yeah. And yet it also comes back to me different. Sure, it's the same sound, but now it's touched something. It's responded to something and it's been a bit changed, right? And so again, there's a sense that it's relationship. And so I like the idea of an echo and I like the idea of a response that feels a little more intimate to me. And it includes our earthliness. And I think that's really important when it comes to spiritual teaching. Even though Dharma doesn't purport to be divinely inspired in the Buddhist tradition, you know, Dharma isn't said to be divinely inspired. Many of us, at least in this culture that I am part of, tend to kind of overlay that idea anyway, usually unconsciously, like, oh, it's Dharma. It was written in the Pali Canon. This is what the Buddha said. And so it has a sense of not humanness, right? Divinity or infallibility or perfection or something that doesn't quite feel earthly all the way. And that's why some of it seems to represent ideals or images or something that feels somehow otherworldly. And so I just like to remind myself, and I like to remind whoever's listening, I guess, too, that, yeah, of course, we live at the intersection of spirit and matter, of consciousness and form, if we prefer that language, time and eternity, if you prefer that language. It doesn't really matter how we describe it, but we're aware that we're more than just earthly beings bound by matter and bound in time, bound by karma. But that doesn't disavow us, and it doesn't separate us, and it doesn't take away our responsibility for, and it certainly, I hope, doesn't ultimately take away our love and our great care for that earthly existence and that matter and that form that bounces sound back. It's really important, right? We live in that intersection. We're amphibians and beings of both worlds, and it's very important to embrace both. So, the first of the three marks of existence that I'm going to talk about is non-self. Anatta, which the a is not, and atman or anatta means not self. There's a whole conversation to be had on that. And today, for this talk, I'm not breaking down non-self. I'm not giving the teaching on how that's understood, misunderstood. There's all sorts of layers, and that's a whole nother talk for a whole nother day. But what we're actually talking about here, to simplify for the sake of what I'm wanting to invite us into today, is the idea of the self, that most of us carry most of the time, can also be understood to be not separate. It can seem to be not static, and that's how we're going to talk about it today. The thing that I normally think of as me, that was born on a certain day, that's going to die on a certain day, that has all of the qualifiers of identity, all of the limitations and edges and compartments that I call identity, my preferences, my skin color, my everything, right? It's something as opposed to something else. I like this as opposed to that. I'm this as opposed to that, right? Conventionally, that's useful. It's useful to think about the self that way. It's a useful fiction, as my teacher says. And it is useful, but it's important to remember that it's a fiction. So today I'm bringing up the idea that, and talking about it in terms of the teaching of non-self is there just to remind us we're part of a vast tapestry, and the thing that we think of as being eternally ours and separate actually isn't those things. And what comes with that is freedom. So if the initial sound of this Dharma is non-self, it isn't permanent, it isn't abiding, it isn't separate, this thing you think of as you, then What I'm inviting as a response, what I'm inviting as an echo, is the experience of connection. In the face of that teaching, when it bounces off of my life, I realize I'm being invited to much greater connection and all that comes with that: empathy, perhaps someday even compassion. We're not describing an emotional state, we're describing a state of being, right? Empathy isn't an emotion, it's a state. Compassion isn't an emotion, it's a state. It's a relationship with it's a relationship with emotions, a relationship with suffering, strictly speaking. But you'll notice that what I'm not talking about is comfort or pleasure necessarily. It doesn't exclude those things either. But the call of non-self, you aren't separate, you're not permanent, you're not abiding. The response, the echo when it bounces off of our life can be, oh, increased awareness, a visceral sense when we feel it really, really deeply of non-separateness, connection, right? And I'm not talking necessarily about the big dramatic experiences of non-self that people talk about experiencing, in the Zendo after a long retreat where body and mind drop away and all those kind of dramatic language. Yeah, maybe it takes that form. Wonderful. But I'm talking about much more just moment by moment as we roll the Dharma of non-self, right, through our hearts and minds as we just are coming up against that idea, as we're reminding ourselves of that teaching over the course of the weeks and months and years of our practice. Slowly but surely we can feel that kind of terminal sense of separation, and the isolation that comes with that begins to get kind of whittled down. It's a little thinner, and our self becomes a little more permeable, right? Those separations become a little gauzier. And so our response, our lived response to the teaching of non-self can be one of increased empathy. Not because we're forcing ourselves to do it, be empathic for your neighbors, be a good Buddhist. No, because it just becomes a natural blossoming in the heart. I begin to actually understand on a much, much deeper level than just my thinking mind how lives aren't really lives, they're really life, right? They're not separate things. They're really just shades and expressions and facets of the one thing. What a connection that is. Yeah. So I've got a little quote that summarizes this, and we'll move on from our favorite Zen teacher. I don't know who our favorite Zen teacher really is, just the one I happen to have in front of me here, Shunryu Suzuki. Through problems, he says, we will realize our true nature. When I'm hungry, what I feel is what you feel when you are hungry. There might be some difference, but not much. And how you feel when you sit is how everyone feels when they sit. Strictly speaking, that is enough, even if you do not attain enlightenment. If everyone sits and finds out how they feel when sitting, that's good enough. As usual, I always experience Suzuki Roshi's simple language, simple words, simple sentences, simple language always, as being deceptive, because there's so much depth implied there. And again, for today's purposes, instead of pretending that I know what he was thinking and feeling when he said those words, for today's principles, the idea of non-self, the Dharma of intimacy, of non-separateness, fits exactly with what he's inviting us to do in his simple, simple, simple way. When I'm hungry, I know what other people feel like when they're hungry. When I sit, I know what other people feel like when they sit. These are everyday human, bodily, informed examples of just, oh, simple empathy. I bet when you sit, it feels much like when I sit. I bet when you're hungry, it feels much like when I'm hungry. non-self. I hope you can sort of see that, right? Where the two separate selves overlap like a Venn diagram so much that you go, oh, the idea of our separateness only really exists on those outer edges, and it's just an idea. The truth is, in the world of experience, this idea of separation doesn't really hold. And I also appreciate, and then we will move on, as usual, uh, Suzuki in a very Soto Zen way, um, always reminds us, if all that you get from your sitting practice is a really holistic, deep, intimate sense of how it feels to sit, that's good enough. You can feel the Soto message in that. That's it. That's it. The activity of just sitting, self-fulfilling. It asks for nothing more. It lacks nothing. And it's not a means to another end. We can always feel how when I'm doing something to get something, how it cheapens. It cheapens the thing that I'm doing a little bit. It's being used as currency. And he's just reminding us, just have the feeling. So one practice you might want to consider in the face of the mark of existence that we call non-self is whatever it is you are doing. That might be right now how you're experiencing listening to this. Whether you're driving a car, going for a walk, cutting carrots to make a soup, talking to your kid on the phone, feeling sleepy, is to just introduce the idea, I wonder if this is how other people feel when they're doing something similar to what I'm doing. I wonder if this is how other people feel. I wonder if this is how other people feel. I wonder how it feels for them. I wonder how that feels for them. Can you feel that just softens the edges of the self, and it brings in the possibility of a deeper sense, a felt sense of connection to others? Non-self. Yeah. Okay, number two. We're moving on. Number two. The second mark of existence, in the order we're doing them today, is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. This is the word, the famous word that's generally translated as suffering, resistance, struggle, constriction. It's the part of us that says no. The part of us that says, no, I want it to be different. I don't like it. I want it to be different. Dukkha, the first noble truth, the universality of the experience of dukkha in human form. That's the first noble truth. It's one of the marks of existence. This is just, once you're born, this is something that's going to be there. Sometimes sometimes this mark of existence is the opposite of dukkha. And some lists, this is what I referenced at the top of the talk, like sometimes the list of the three marks replaces dukkha with sukha, which is great joy. It says, actually, no, the teaching isn't that a mark of existence is suffering. The mark of existence is actually joy, and humans create suffering. And so I'm not going down that road today. I'm just not doing that for this conversation. If you're interested more on this, read the Pali Canon. But specifically, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a voice most of us know, and he's very accessible, references this and spends a little bit of time on this in his book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, toward the beginning. And he has a whole chapter on the three marks of existence and this very mark, and you can't miss it. And I find his words inspirational and compelling, and I tend to land on his side of the argument. But it doesn't really matter whether it's an argument or not. The point is, the original list, and it's perfectly good teaching, perfectly good dharma, is one of the three marks of existence is dukkha. So that's what we're going to talk about. Struggle, resistance, constriction, the no. And so the response, the echo, once this dharma, once this teaching bounces off of us, once this truth bounces off of our very human lives, might be the experience increasing over a great time, right? This is something we're cultivating. The dharma of appreciation, sukha, joy. Contentment. Not joy necessarily as an emotion, although that would be fine. Joy more again as a state of mind, a state of being. Like content isn't really an emotion. I know sometimes it's on emotion lists, and that's fine. I don't need to argue about that. But strictly speaking, it's a state of mind where you don't need anything to be different. That's what content actually is. If you really get close to it, you're like, it isn't that everything is good. It's that I'm just not fighting with anything. I'm just not fighting with anything. I don't need whatever the thing is that's happening to be different. I'm not fighting. And I call that content. So it's, from a Buddhist perspective, very, very significant, hugely significant, that content, the state we call content, can include pain, can even include suffering, if I'm not additionally resisting the part of me that's resisting. Right? Suffering is resistance. Suffering is, no, I don't like it. Suffering is, I want it to be different. Suffering is, I have my own agenda. Suffering, constriction, right? What if that's arising and I don't need for that to be different? What if I can just see it as a human response, as a human expression of the First Noble Truth? Oh yes, this is the thing that happens for humans. I see it. There it is. I could even have contentment include suffering. It's a very challenging idea for us at the beginning to think, yep, I can be in pain and still be content. I can be with somebody who's in pain and still be content. But I encourage you to look at this very, very carefully. This teaching it's a difficult teaching to get, but it's actually not complex. It's simple. The mechanism is simple. And its possibilities for us are profound. We can appreciate pain. You can appreciate the part of you that resists. You can appreciate it. Appreciate. I'm not talking again about having a giddy, happy, delighted, distracted, entertained response. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about an emotional response. I'm talking about appreciation is deeper than that. Appreciation is understanding that something is glowing from within and being able to recognize that. Right? Appreciation is being able to see something's value because it exists, not its value because of what it does for us or how it serves us or how it might improve me. Can you feel? It just doesn't have an acquisitive, acquiring feel. It doesn't have a owning, using, possessing feel. Like, oh, I just appreciate. It's noticing the flower without picking it, right? And so we can even appreciate, and we can use that word in this way, like, oh, I appreciate your point of view. Like, I get how you go there. You're a human just like me. The things that have happened to you are the things that have happened to you, just like the things that have happened to me are the things that have happened to me. And so, given your experience, you would end up with that perspective. I get it. I understand it. I can appreciate that. Can you feel there's just a different inflection there than, oh, I so appreciate what you did for me? That has more of a, this isn't, again, a judge. This is not a judging thing. It's just we're wanting to explore the idea of appreciation, not having the conditions of what it's implying for the self. That's what we're meaning by the Dharma of Sukha, or the Dharma of appreciation. This is the experiencing, in one way of talking about it, of just love. Love in the big sense, love in the actual sense, capital L love, Corinthians love, whatever you want to call it. Love that doesn't pick and choose, right? If it's picking and choosing, it's not spiritual love. It's ego-based preference. Big love doesn't pick and choose. And so it feels like a very, very human response. It feels like a very human response to the truth, to the reality of the very human experience, the universal human experience of suffering, of dukkha. Yeah, that's a mark of existence. So here's our quote for this one, and then we'll move on. This one's from Tennessee Williams, our other favorite Zen teacher, right? He's not really a Zen teacher. I'm just saying that to be funny. The world is violent and mercurial. It will have its way with you. We are saved only by love. Love for each other, and the love that we pour into the art we feel compelled to share. Being a parent, being a writer, a painter, being a friend. We live in a perpetually burning building, and what we must save from it all the time is love. I certainly cannot improve on that. There's a lot of Buddhism in that quote. I don't know the first thing about Tennessee Williams' personal life and whether he was ever exposed to any of these ideas, but he essentially starts by giving us a version of the first noble truth, which is the world is violent and mercurial and it will have its way with us. We're talking about just once you're born, it's going to be a rough ride for a few decades. That's just how it works, right? It's going to have its way with you. I can actually feel in that. And again, I don't know anything about Tennessee Williams, but my projection today is a deep acceptance. Yeah, I'm not happy about it necessarily, but that's what's going to happen. When you hold that sweet little baby and it comes out screaming like all babies do, you wish for it all the best. You want every door to open and every day to be bright and all the beds to be soft and every hunger pain to be met with beautiful food. But you know, of course, you know in the bottom of your heart, the second mark of existence is true. When you hold that little one, you're like, oh, honey, it's going to be a rough ride. I don't know how rough. I don't know what form it's going to take. But the world is violent and it is mercurial. It's not a safe place. It's going to have its way with you. You're going to get kicked around, right? And so to be reminded, we are saved by love. He then defines love, the love for each other, the love we pour into the art we feel compelled to share. He was an artist, obviously, a writer, a playwright. But then he defines that as parent, writer, painter, friend. You realize, oh, he's using art in the largest possible sense. Art really is running errands. Art is making a soup. Art is, of course, painting, singing, dancing. Art is performing a ritual, the ritual of gasho, the gesture we make when we put our palms together. That's art. It's a symbolic expression of something, right? That's a ritual act. That's art. That's what art is. To make something, to make an energy that's always present manifest in the world in an explicit way. Right? The gasho is always happening. It's never absent. We all know what this can mean, but by me doing it, I'm performing the ritual. I'm doing the art of the expression, right? That's what expression is. And then finally, he says, which I just think is gorgeous, we live in a perpetually burning building. Correct. He's using a metaphor from the Lotus Sutra in Buddhism. Whether he knew it or not, he's certainly, whether he knows it or not, reminding us that Buddha gave what's called the fire sermon, where he just looks out and says, it's all on fire, everything, all of it. It's burning all the time, all of it. Suffering is present, right? We live in a world where things eat other things to survive. Life feeds on life. Death is always happening, right? Difficulty is always happening. Struggle is always happening. Pain is always happening. Endings are always happening. That's the deal. The world is a perpetually burning place. That's correct. And so the place of Dharma, the point of Dharma, the medicine of Dharma is to meet that, right? Not fight against it, wish it was different. How do we work with that? What do we do in response? That's a hell of a call, right? Dukkha, the world's on fire. What a call. What if our echo was love? What if our echo was love? What if our response was love? It's the only possible response. It's the only possible response. The only thing that ever works, the only thing that ever has worked, the only thing that ever will work. All of us know this in the very, very, very bottom of our being, in the deepest, truest, immortal part of ourselves. We know that there's always only ever, ever, ever been one answer. And that can take a trillion different forms, an infinite number of different forms. But big love, of course, is the answer. Right? So what a thing. The second call. The first call, you're not separate. Non-self. Second call, it hurts. It's on fire. Suffering exists right now. In your body, in your heart, in your mind, right now. How do you respond? right? What's your echo? Okay. And then third and last. The third mark of existence is impermanence. Um, if you look really carefully at impermanence, you can see the non-self piece. And if you look really deeply at non-self, you can see the impermanence piece. There's a lot of overlap between those two teachings. There's also an overlap between those two teachings and dukkha in the original Pali, and it's there for a lot of reasons. We want things to be permanent, and they aren't, and therefore we suffer and that kind of stuff. So everything is changing, everything is changing, everything is changing, everything is changing, everything is changing. Everybody understands impermanence. There's not one human being who doesn't, on some level, know everything changes all the time. What most people do most of the time is live in conscious ignorance of it, ignoring it, deny it, or just not think about it. But it's not a surprise if we're really, really honest with ourselves. When something goes away, we do experience, if we're not expecting it, we do experience a moment of surprise, and then we experience a second moment of, but of course it is, because everything is, right? So of course we get to allow ourselves the arrest of shock or surprise, especially if what we have, that what we experience as impermanent is sudden and violent and something to which we are deeply attached, like a death, the death of something or someone that we really, really care about. Of course, right? We come by all of our responses honestly. We are heir to all of them. But what we also know, and I just believe everybody knows this because everybody lives in the same world, is everything goes away. Because every single piece of your lived experience has changed. You've never had a thought that came and didn't leave. It's not possible. You've never experienced it. No human being ever has in the history of the world. No human being has ever experienced in the history of the world a feeling that came and didn't leave, a sensation that came and didn't leave, an emotion that came and didn't leave, an idea that came and didn't leave, a relationship that came and didn't leave, a house that came and didn't leave, a church, a religion. All of it comes and goes. It changes, it comes, and it changes, and it goes, right? We might not be there imagining in the field of time that we're the witness to the genesis of a brand new club. And we might not live to see the end of that club, but we know it's changing all the time. We have a new member, an old one leaves. Somebody comes in, somebody goes out. Somebody comes in, somebody goes out. Right? And the part of us that wants to argue with impermanence, that imagines that impermanence means we're being robbed of something perpetually. The part of us that argues with impermanence always wants to think of, what about the mountains? The mountains are permanent. What about the Catholic Church? That's been around for 2,000 years. You can feel, I'm convinced you, whoever you are listening to this, I'm convinced you can feel, I understand the part of me that wants to fight. I understand it. I get the argument that the mountain will never go away. I get the argument that death and taxes or whatever are the only inevitables, the only permanents, the only things that are, we all forever know better. The mountain didn't used to be a mountain, and someday it won't be. And the club that I'm a member of didn't used to exist, and someday it won't. There's no such thing as something that has always been in the field of time. And that's what the marks of existence are about. That's the existence in time, in space and in time, right? These three marks of existence are intended. They're intended for our ego selves. These are teachings being given to our ego selves, our earthly selves, our human selves, our embodied selves. Can you feel that? This is about the part of us that thinks it's going to last forever. We're just being reminded, no, it doesn't. There's another part of ourselves that doesn't need to be reminded of this because it knows nothing of time, but we're not going there today. Impermanence, impermanence, impermanence. So we want to look carefully at the part of us that says, no, I don't like this. And if we look carefully enough at it, it becomes plain. You don't need me to guide you through it. Because what becomes plain when we look really, really carefully is actually, I just have preferences around what's permanent and what isn't permanent. And there are some things I wish were permanent, and there are some things I wish weren't permanent. And all of it comes from the self, and all of it is just me having preference. I want the things that I like that make me feel good to stay forever so that I feel good forever, because that's what I imagine would be true. And I want the things that I don't like to go away quickly and never come back. Can you feel it? So I'm half okay with impermanent as long as I'm the one who gets to choose the things that are coming and staying and the things that are coming and going. Can you feel it? Yeah. Impermanence. The truth is we love impermanence. Oh, that's right. And we hate it. It just depends on what the separate imagined experience is that I'm clinging to or wanting to push away. So what is our echo? When the truth of impermanence and the teaching of impermanence bounces off of your life, I don't know what it'll be, but I'll invite a possibility. Perhaps the Dharma of infinity, the Dharma of timelessness, the awareness of that which is not bound by time, the self that shows up when the self goes away. That sounds like I'm talking nonsense. I'm not. I'm just trying to get words to do something that they don't like to do. This is the place of spiritual practice. It's certainly the place that religions that are a form of spiritual practice spend a lot of time. All of them seem to share an idea that we're more than just the body, and the body is the thing that's born, changes, and dies. The body is the impermanent vessel, the impermanent expression. Right? They all seem to share some basic idea of this thing. I'm pointing to my body, pointing to myself, imagining that's who I am, is going, going, gone, and everybody knows that. That's why we can't pretend to be surprised when a body stops working. That's what they do, right? They work and then they don't. So perhaps one of the responses, one of the echoes, isn't a belief that we put inside of our head, a story about how we have a part of us that doesn't die, and maybe something good happens to it, maybe something bad happens to it. I'm not arguing against faith. I'm not arguing against belief. That's not the point of this talk. The point of this talk is to invite you into an experience of, if I'm the one watching impermanence, I must not be impermanent. Anything I can observe, I must not be. That's interesting. That's interesting. Because I have no problem observing impermanence. And I know you don't either. Because the soup you made last week is gone. And the version of you that was 5 years old and was scared to get on the school bus the first day of kindergarten, that experience isn't happening anymore. The breath you took when you heard me say the beginning of this sentence is not the breath you are in the middle of taking right now. You can observe change all the time. Change, 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 change. So as meditators, at some point, you can bring some of this kind of inquiry into your practice, your meditation practice. If all I can observe I am not, is that a truth? How far does that truth go? And if I can observe impermanence, am I therefore not impermanent? Am I therefore permanent? What is permanence? What is infinity? Right? Is it a long, 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 long time, or is it just no time? This is very, very important to Buddhism, the idea of impermanence, and the relationship with time, and the relationship with self, and the relationship with moments. And you can see how this teaching applies to the part of us that believes in time, and the part of us that believes in birth, and the part of us that believes in death, the part of us that believes in beginnings, and the part of us that believes in endings. Of course, we love that part, right? And we're curious about perhaps our capacity to apprehend something else. Perhaps. Perhaps in my actual felt experience, there's only ever been this moment. Perhaps it's true that I've never actually experienced a moment that wasn't this moment. Perhaps it's actually true. Perhaps it's actually true that birth and death are just changing. They're only something I can experience in the world of space and time. Perhaps even impermanence itself is impermanent. Perhaps. So here's our quote. I can feel how troublemaking this third one is, how hard it is to wrap our brains around this one. That's fine. That isn't the organ you want to wrap around this anyway. Here's our quote, and I wish I could tell you who it's from. I wish, but I don't know who wrote this. It's from an episode of Call the Midwife. If you're looking for good Dharma, go watch Call the Midwife. But this speaks quite profoundly and quite beautifully to what we're talking about today. And please don't be one of these people who thinks like Dharma is Buddhism and only Buddhists can do Dharma. That's the smallest possible expression of Dharma. Yes, that's true. I understand the word being used that way. I have no problem with it. Good. But please don't ever think whoever you are or whatever club you're part of has some sort of weird monopoly on wisdom or compassion or love, because the truth is you go for a walk in the woods, there's nothing but Dharma happening. And so to imagine that everybody doesn't have access to that, or it can only come through certain things by people carrying weird hats and whisks, is ridiculous. It'll make your world very, very small, and it'll close something down that's extremely important. It's really good for us to remember that words are the least skillful way of conveying Dharma. That's true. We use them all the time, because for a lot of us, that's the best we got. It's still the least skillful. It's still the least skillful. Your thoughts about love are the least skillful manifestation of love, right? And that's not a judgment, that's a discernment. All of these words that I'm using have opposites. All the words I'm using have limits. All of the words I'm using, as skillful as they are, as skillful as this symbol system we call language is for humans, we love it, it's still profoundly limiting. Right? And every good Zen teacher will tell you silence is best. Always silence. Silence is always best. Always. There is nothing so much like God as silence, as Meister Eckhart and the other Zen teachers who don't leap to mind right now, come to mind, have said the same thing. Silence is best. After silence, music is best. After music, ritual is best, right? We're in that realm. And finally, we come to what you're doing right now, which is listening to somebody talk. So there, I completely distracted myself. Here's our wonderful Dharma words from Call the Midwife about impermanence and the possibility of experiencing something that's purpose, interbeing, something beyond time. Sometimes we heal because we realize we did not break alone. The darkness was never absolute. The rain was never all there was. The scars will be beautiful. Bound by love, we will outlive the stars. I find that very evocative. I find that absolutely beautiful. And I find it to be extremely good Dharma. Right? We heal because we didn't break alone. There's the recognition of interconnectedness. There's the recognition of non-separateness. That's not self. The inclusion of rain, the inclusion of darkness, the inclusion of scars tells us suffering is present. There's the second mark of existence. And yet we are reminded that darkness wasn't absolute. The rain was never all there was. Can you feel it? Impermanence. No matter what the rainstorm is, it stops. No matter how dark it is, it ends. That's the deal. There's the third. Impermanence. And then we get a beautiful benediction. The scars will be beautiful. Can you feel the love there? Not this should never have happened. Of course, it's a reminder of a wound. Your heart has many of them. Your mind has many of them. Your body has many of them. The scars will be beautiful. Bound by love, we outlive the stars. There's a profound spiritual truth in that last sentence, and I'm not going to speak to it today. Because part of you is going to fight with that, and that's A-okay. And there's another part of you that I encourage you bring that fighting part to. Because there's another part of you that goes, yep, that's correct. Right? We want our spiritual nature to be in very intimate relationship with our human nature. Our human nature struggles so. Our human nature suffers so. Grasping, running, striving, chasing. It's not an easy task. It's a hard thing being a person. Being a human being is no small thing. Very, very challenging. So there's a part of you that can bear witness to that and hold it close and offer an awful lot of truth. Because that human part is confused so much of the time, and offered an awful lot of comfort. Because that human part is lonely and cold so much of the time. That's what the three calls, the three marks of existence, are designed to do. They're designed to bring us in loving relationship with inevitabilities of having a human experience. Yeah, there are deep wisdom teachings. But if the result isn't love, if the result isn't increased intimacy with the human experience from a place of deep acceptance and profound compassion, then that Dharma isn't very good. So that's what we're doing. We're just imagining that they are calls, and we're imagining that we get to respond. I hope you can understand that everything we're talking about today is interior to you, right? These teachings don't actually come from without you. They actually come from a place in you that has always known them. So thank you for listening. This was kind of a fun one to talk about for me. The three marks of existence, when I first experienced them, were a challenging teaching for me, and they actually ended up leaving me kind of sad. No self, suffering, everything's going away. That's kind of how I took it, and I went, geez, boy, it's pretty strong medicine, you know. And it is strong medicine. They are strong medicine. But I don't experience them now the way that I did 30 years ago. You know, I experience 30 years from now, if I'm still around. If whatever this thing is talking to you is still around, I expect that it'll be very different then too. But remind yourself, as we leave each other today, Dharma is always understood to be medicine. It's always understood to be medicine. And so if that's not the right medicine for you right now, don't worry about it. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it. If the dosage that's being given doesn't feel kind to you, don't worry about it. Choose something else. I really do believe we all have a profound intuition when we access it and when we listen to it and when we touch it and spend time with it, which is what meditation's about, really. We know. We know what medicine we need, and we know what medicine we don't need. So I hope this is good medicine for you right now. If it's not, don't take it. Put it back on the shelf. Close the medicine cabinet. Go to sleep. Thank you for your attention today. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.